So we want to move into SQL. In terms of, I'll go through a few concepts with SQL. The way I like to compare it to is if you ever worked with like Excel or like a Google document, right? Then a lot of the concepts kind of line up. So essentially for each project, like for each project, you'll have like a separate database, right? So you can imagine, we just did work with these recipes. We might have like a database for, like a recipes app or a project. And maybe you can imagine, we could use that. Like we have like recipes. I'm gonna have like a recipes database. I'll call it like recipes API database. So for instance, like we like wanted to pull the data and then just store it in our own local database on our computer. Okay. We might have, this would be in our entire database, one database for one single project. All right. And then this database might have various tables. So a table you can think of as a spreadsheet. So maybe for instance, we'd have a thing for like ingredients. Sorry, let's actually put this here. Ingredients. So maybe you'd have, like the name of the ingredient, like the category, right? These are all like the columns. And here maybe you'd have like cheese, and this is like dairy, right? Here maybe you have beef, non-dairy, right? And you can have multiple tables too. So this is one table, but imagine now I just create another sheet, and this will be maybe like the recipes, right? And then you'd have like the name, and this would be, maybe the name is a cheeseburger, right? And you can imagine somehow, we'll talk about this later, we might connect these ingredients, like the information in this table to the information in this table. We're not getting there today, but one day we'll do that. So this is the kind of the idea, right? You have this overall database. The database holds multiple tables, right? We'll generally just be using one database per project. One application, meaning like, a code base with like 1 million lines of code, like can survive and work well. Like the typical scenario is just to have one database for your entire, that sits kind of underneath your entire code base. And the reason why we even need SQL is this is where we store our data. So just remember, like, when we run Python 3 and we have like some JSON or, a variable name equals like hello, like this is stored in memory. But once you exit out of this, it's gone, right? We don't have it again. So with SQL, this data is going to be stored to disk, like it's going to be saved on your computer. And the other thing is SQL is very fast at reading this data into memory so that then you can use it. All right. So for storage of data, SQL is typically the way to go. We'll update that. It showed different techniques for storage, but for now, it's certainly like a better option than Python. All right, and better than just like storing it in some CSV file as well. So okay, so far you can just see like we have these concepts of a database. A database holds multiple tables. Each table is kind of like a different entity, right? Like you kind of have this ingredients and recipes, and you'll start to develop an intuition for this. It almost lines up to like REST a little bit, right? We talked about REST. We have, think about like Facebook. There's, your posts, and there's your friends, and there's businesses and things like that. So in terms of how to actually work with SQL, well, here's what we can do. What I did before this is I did brew install SQLite 3. So SQLite 3 is like the software application that's going to run our SQL code to start. We'll upgrade that application to Postgres in about a week or so. But for now, this works fine. So I did brew install SQLite 3. And then just like the same way that you can type Python 3, all right, you can also type like SQLite 3. And now we are in SQL. And it says, connected to a transient, meaning like temporary, in-memory database. All right. And let's exit. I think I have to do dot exit. Okay. Dot exit to exit that SQL console. So what I'm going to do now is let's create a database. Let's create a database called, we will do like, I think this like barbershop type database. All right, so let's change this. And you can imagine maybe we have like employees. And each employee has like a name and maybe like a phone number. Right. Okay. And that's pretty good for now. So how do we do this? Well, let's see. Let me just create SQL lecture. So I'll create a folder called SQL lecture, and then I'll CD into it. And then what I'll do is I'm going to create a new file, and this will be called, it should be called barbershop. But this will be called the name of my table for right now. So I'm going to do touch create employees.sql. And then we'll open this up. Okay. So notice I'm doing a .sql file instead of a .py file in this case. And now the first thing I'm going to do is just create like the structure. There's kind of two steps that we need to do. First, we create like the structure that holds our data. Create the table, and then the second thing is going to be insert data into our database. So the first step we'll do is just create table, and then, sorry, you can see I already did it before class. Create table, employees, and then we need to say like what are the columns that we're creating. So first column is name, and in addition to like the name of the column, right, like this is for Bob and Fred, etc., you have to specify the type of data. So in this case, instead of string, like the equivalent of string for SQL or for SQLite is going to be text. Okay? And then we can do the same thing for phone number. That can also be text. Maybe we have one more, so email, and that would be text as well. So you can see create table, and you're not going to create like, I tend to forget this syntax lots of times. Creating tables, you can look it up, but it's not so bad. Create table, the table name, parentheses, and then just column name, data type, column name, data type, comma after each one except for the last one. And then finally we should have a semicolon at the end. Okay. Now, if we want to run this code, what we'll do is type SQLite 3. And then I believe it's the name of the database. So we're going to create a new database called barbershop DB. And we're going to run this table, create employees.sql, against this new database, barbershop DB. And I'll press return. So just to show you one thing beforehand, notice at this point we don't have any database on our system. But once I do that, create, SQLite 3, barbershop.db, and run against this create employees.sql. Now you can see we have a new database called barbershop DB. The other thing is, if you want to look at that database, you can type SQLite 3, followed by the name of the database, barbershop.db. And now we are connected to that database, I believe. Like if you look at .tables, you can see we have created that table called employees. So far what we did was we created this file, employees. We have the create table command, followed by the name of the table, column, data type. And then what we did was we said, all right, we are going to run this file that we just created against this new database. And once we did that, it both created the database and it created that table inside of it. Questions about this so far? All right. One thing to note is like there is no data in the database. So if I just do a simple select statement, which we haven't learned yet, But if you want to select all the data, like select all from employees, semicolon, there is no data coming back here. So that's the next thing we should do, is create like an insert into file. So we'll just do like insert employees.sql. All right. And now we can do insert into employees. And then the columns I'm going to insert data into. So this will be like, what was it? The name, phone number, and email. And then specify the values. And now here.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you create this database through that Excel file, or because we have one entry Bob over there? And why is not, because we created this.
This Excel file is just me visualizing. This has nothing to do
Oh,
with
okay.
what occurred. This is on
Okay.
Google. Like it's not anywhere on my computer. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just showing you the format ahead of time. Everything that was created through running this code. So that's all we've run so far. Right? So all we did so far was basically create the skeleton. Like we just created kind of like a table that has the name, phone number, and email. Because that's all it says here. And there's no data, right, that we're specifying yet in here. So the next thing we'll do now is have this insert into command, which will say insert into the employees table these columns, and we want to insert in there this data. So like fred@gmail.com, right? And then the next one, do like Bob. All right, and then same thing, we need to. So this whole thing is one SQL statement. Insert into employees these values, Fred, Bob. Put a comma between each tuple, and then a semicolon to end the SQL statement. Okay, just like the same way here, we put a semicolon to end the SQL statement. So SQL is a little bit more, or a little less, I say, like forgiving sometimes about syntax than Python is. So you just have to like be a little more explicit about it. So now, same thing. We want to run this code, SQLite 3, against the Barbershop database. We want to run the insert into. So I have this caret to like kind of run this file against my database. And it will look for a table called employees. It should find it. And then it will insert in these values in these corresponding columns. Let's see if that would seem to have worked. If you don't get a complaint, then it worked. Like in other words, let's say I messed this up and I put like hometown here. I think this will break and tell me, hey, there is no column called hometown. Let's see that. So this time I'm going to run the file, insert employees against this database. And you see this? Parse error near line 1. Table employees has no column named hometown. What's line 1? Right here. Right? So like this error message can be pretty good for us. So now at this point, I'll just do SQLite 3. Again, I need to specify my database. This way I'm like accessing my database. And now I can, here's my table. Sorry, I'll do select all from employees. And now you can see there's my employees. Okay? And these are stored there, right? I can exit out of this console and run this again, and these are always in there. So that's the idea, is this is a way for us to like store our data, and then what we'll mainly be working with in SQL, like 99% of the time, are these select statements and making these more and more complicated. Okay? For right now, all this is saying, just so you know, is saying, give me all the columns from and all the rows from the employees table. So this select star is actually select all the columns. And by default, it's going to give you all of the rows of data in there. Okay, so select star from employees. And again, notice I'm putting a semicolon at the end of every SQL statement, just like I did here, and just like I did here. the main thing I think for now to get just like kind of have in your head is, okay, we have this database. This database holds multiple tables, and each table has like, columns and rows of data. Okay, and then what we did was, we created these files to first create like the skeleton, right? First create this table that just has no data in it, and then the second step is to insert in the data. Questions about that? All right. So, yeah, we're gonna start slowly. So what I'll do is, all right, let's go through. Is it this? Yeah, let's go through like just some of this salad chop thing. So let's say we want to, create these tables. First of all, if you want to exit, you kind of have to pay attention to what context you're in. So right now you see I'm in SQLite 3, right? None of the like terminal commands are going to work right now. So you can't like run a file right now. That only works from the bash terminal. Right now you're in SQLite 3 context. So all you can do is, you can do SQL commands, of which I know we're very new to. But for instance, you could, but you cannot like run a terminal, or you cannot like put in touch. You cannot do like anything that says like the file name .sql. That's not going to work here. So if you want to do that, you have to exit out of this. And the way to do that is different from with the Python shell, right? With the Python shell, it's exit parentheses. But here, it's just .exit. Okay? And that's just a SQLite 3 command. It's just .exit. Okay? I'm going to notice now I'm back in the shell. So now I can do like cd ... And let's call this like mean green or whatever. So we'll make directory mean green. All right, and then I'll cd into there. And now what can we do? So now let's think about if we want to create a table. Like I guess we're creating this employees table. There's two different ways we can do this. All right. The first way we can do this is you can create it from the SQLite 3 shell. So we can do that by maybe typing SQLite 3, and then we want to specify like our database. So I think for us it's like saladshop.db. So now this is going to like, nothing will occur if you just type this, but you don't do anything. So I just type .exit. You can see there is no saladshop.db file created here. But if I instead open up SQLite 3 with this saladshop.db, and then I maybe like make some changes. For instance, let's create a table. So there's two ways you can create a table. One is you can, this way, I don't think I showed this yet, you can just copy and paste your SQL code into the shell and press return. Now, if you forget the semicolon here, nothing's going to happen because it does not execute your SQL statement until you have a semicolon. So I just forget the semicolon. You can see it's like waiting, the ... arrow. So what I need to do is finish my SQL statement by putting the semicolon here, and now press return. And now you can see .tables, we've created it. So notice right here, there's no .sql, like, right? I'm not referencing any file. I'm just literally typing in the pure SQL command. So that's one way that we can do that. If I want to drop the table, I believe I can do drop table employees, semicolon. And now if you look at .tables, it's gone. And now I can exit out of SQLite and move back to my terminal. Okay, so what did I do? We entered into SQLite 3 with the saladshop.db. So we're basically saying if we make some changes, we will be creating the saladshop.db file. And then we said we're just going to create the table inside while I'm in the SQLite shell. Okay? And this SQLite shell, we can put in any SQL statement, including a create table statement. And we finished it with this semicolon. And then we just checked that it actually worked. So we did .tables. Finally, we wanted to like undo what we did, so we dropped it, and then we exited with .exit. Okay. So that's one way. So notice we do have the saladshop.db here. Why? Because we actually like kind of made it worth saving by initially creating this table. The other way that we can create a table is by, or run really any SQL commands, is by doing touch, like create a file that has our SQL statement in it. So we'll do create employees.sql. So that's what I'm indicating here. This is commented out, and I'm just trying to say, hey, this code is in this file, should be in this file. And then you can open up VS Code, and then, this is empty right now, but we could paste this here. So again, this is kind of following the format of create table, the name of the table, and then the columns that we want. So ID, name, and the data type. We'll talk about this stuff later, the primary key, blah, blah. But for now, it's like name as text. Notice again, everything else is the same, like we're ending with a semicolon. Now, if we look at SQLite 3, if we go to look at the shell real fast, and just type tables, right? There are no tables here. So we can exit out with .exit, and now we can run to create this, to actually execute this code, right? If this was Python, we'd have to execute the code by doing Python 3 and run the file that way. But it's SQL, so we're going to type SQLite 3. And then what's extra about SQL is we have to say what database are we running this file against. So we have to say against the saladshop.db file that lives here, this is our database. Run this and create employees.sql code. All right, so run this code, this file, which has this command inside of it. So it's going to be just like as if we copied and pasted it into our SQL shell. So we're SQLite 3, saladshop.db, against this database, caret, run this file. Then we press return, and now let's take a look. So we can take a look by going into that saladshop.db. So SQLite 3, connect to this database. Now let's look at .tables. And you see this table is created. And if you look at .schema, you can kind of see what has been. This is giving you a little bit more information about the table. It shows you the columns, etc. One other thing I just wanted to point out is while this file does exist, this database file, you don't want to mess with this. Don't touch it really, because if you touch it, you're gonna corrupt. You could alter, mess with this database. It's kind of like if you're opening up a picture file, like a JPEG, in a text editor, you start messing around with it. Who knows what's, what I mean? That's not the way you're supposed to interact with a photo, right? You open up whatever picture app there is. Same thing here, right? You don't really interact with it this way. If you want to view your database, you'll do so through SQLite 3 and do it that way. Oh, sorry, I just made the mistake of typing in a shell command while in the console. But I'll do .tables. Shoot. Can I do this? Let's try it again. I have to quit. Let's do .exit if I can, and let's do it again, and now I'll do .tables. Oh, there are no tables here. Why is that? Oh, why is that, guys? There was no tables because I just typed SQLite 3, but I didn't connect to an actual database. Look at me. So let's do .exit, and I'm going to do SQLite 3, and I want to open up SQLite 3 connecting to this database, saladshop.db, and now do .tables, and now there's my table, employees. Okay, so we showed two different ways to run this command. One is simply you can copy and paste it into the shell. Make sure you have the semicolon at the end and press enter. I'm not going to do that this time, I don't think. So the other way you can do that is you can say run this file, create employees.sql against my database. Okay. Okay, tell me other questions or other things that came up. Those were the main things I saw. You all sure? I know that this is a new, I don't think conceptually it's that difficult for you all, but just kind of messing around the keyboard, it feels like you're still getting used to it.
Did you do touch to create the database?
Did I do touch? No. So to create the database, all I did, what if you the database will be created for you automatically, right? So let's just see that again. Let's delete this. So if you specify,
Hey Jeff, can you record?
I am recording. Yeah. If you specify the database here, right? Saladshop.db. Notice the file's not here, but once you run code against the database, and if you just do salad shop, here we are connecting to a database, but because there's nothing inside, there's no tables, SQLA3 will be like, maybe it will. I guess once I ran a command, then it automatically created the database. That's what just happened. So I guess once I ran a command, it's like, all right, we better create this thing, and it just created it right there. The other way, let's delete this again. Normally the way that I think my database will be created is if I run this file, if I do this, right, just run this file, create employees against the database that does not yet exist, SQLA3 will create the database and also run this code which creates this table. So let's do that. Okay, so now there's my database again. And now I'll connect to SQLA3, saladshop.db. And if we look at .tables, you can see this got ran, and it did create this table. Okay. Just pay attention to what context you're in, right? Like, you're in SQLite right now, so you can't do touch or anything .SQL. If you want, you can copy and paste this code over into here. Right? Generally, that's not what you would do for like a create table. Normally, you would do it this way. Right? Create SQLite3 against this database, run this file. All right, other questions before I want to, give you guys a chance to keep working on this. But any other questions that came up? Okay. Yeah.
Are these commands the same in Bash as well, or
say that one more time? Or say that again.
Those commands that you've been using, are they the same in Git Bash as well?
Yes. These commands. Yeah, this should work the same. I think the only difference is, my guess, is that you'll have to do winpty./SQLite3.exe, and then everything else will be the same. That's my guess for Windows. All right. So I'll put you all back in breakout rooms, let you keep going with it. I'll just have it seems like most people will just be here. So I'll just have the reading deployed, the Python and SQL reading, in case people finish early, but I'll undeploy the lab because we'll do that in the next class.